Over the next 10 years, what are the greatest challenges Myrtle Beach will face? And briefly, what needs to be done for us to rise to those challenges?
You know, when we start with transparency and open up the whole development process and regulations, realize we have new generations of residents here, both the retired and the younger generation that still love to come to the beach, even the retired people. We need to keep moving forward, and we've been stagnant for at least the 12 years I've been here in the downtown area. It's not good for the community. It's not good for the tax base of the city, and we need to take the reins off of the chokehold of the city government and let these things happen, like Mike just said. That's what has to happen over the next 10 years. I mean, and the future is what happens in the next 6 months probably, because we don't want to let the same stuff going on from the last 12 years continue.
Over Father's Day weekend, people complain that we lack enough police presence in this city. Would you agree with that statement? And if so, how would we acquire a better or more efficient presence?
As I said before, public safety is number one. Father's Day weekend showed everybody how we don't prioritize our public safety. I know Ann was involved this spring as much as I was going through the budget process with City Council, and I witnessed them after Easter. City manager put another $1 million or so in the budget, and they were struggling how to balance the budget over a $400,000 deficit. And not once did they get creative on how to balance it with pushing aside other expenses or finding other sources to fund that. So, of course, they didn't want to raise any taxes, so they raised fees. If I'm mayor, and when I get elected, I will engage immediately professionals that are retired that live in this community. There's over 1,000 of them, and the existing staff. And I don't have a magic number, whether it's 50, 100, 200 police officers, but we cannot afford not to have the proper level of law enforcement. As you know, last year, the city mayor criticized the statistics, the crime statistics coming out, as being skewed because it's based on 30,000 permanent population in the city. Well, come back to Easter, he made some statements to the news that it's based on, the statistics prior were based on permanent population. Now, he recognized that the staffing of the police force is based on permanent population. And you just can't have both ways. So somewhere in between is the balance, but we just cannot not pay attention to this, or we won't have a beach, and everybody's property values will come down. All revenues and all expenses of this city are on the table if I'm mayor, and we're going to fund this, and we're going to fund it real quick. Getting to the state holdup of certifications and things like that, there's other ways to supplement the law enforcement forces that nobody seems to want to go in some creative ways of maybe engaging some of these retired officers to do some of the tasks that can be done without the full certification of South Carolina. And you know, we also are a big draw in this state, and we should go to our state legislatures and make the system work for us and not just the way the system works for them. So thank you.
How do you feel the barricades on Ocean Boulevard have impacted Myrtle Beach since the Father's Day shootings? Has it been positive, negative, a mix? Would you keep them?
I think the barricades were an overreaction to the lack of attention to the levels of law enforcement we need in town. I attended a meeting that our current mayor was at, and he was asked that same question about the barricades, and his answer was something in the order of it's protecting pedestrians from getting hit by cars. And I must have missed that news report about all those pedestrian hits down the boulevard. And I believe one of the other small businessmen asked him if that was only happening on certain blocks of the boulevard, because the barricades were suspiciously not on the whole length of the boulevard. Not to mention, I guess he doesn't want to protect any other pedestrians in the rest of the city. But I do have a use for the barricades, if anybody was curious. I was thinking about lining the swashes as they go out to the ocean so these kids don't get sick.
The TDF Should the TDF stay in effect? If so, where should the money go?
I believe our existing mayor doesn't believe our citizens of this city are smart enough to vote on a referendum on how they want to be taxed. I believe he said that. The TDF tax is just another revenue source we have that when I'm mayor, I'm going to dissect all our revenue sources and see what works and what doesn't. I'm tired of some of the things that we pay taxes on are not representing all the citizens equally and their benefit on how they're expended. So am I in favor of the TDF tax? First of all, we don't really know how it's being expended. I mean, we do know it creates a situation where neighbors pay their other neighbors' real estate taxes. We know it's paying for some tourism advertising, and we just don't know how that whole procurement process is. It's just not open and transparent. So we're going to take a big can opener and open that can, and we'll go from there. And it's something it's on the table that we'll look at. I agree with Ann. What will happen, regardless of the outcome of the election in November, is I believe this existing council will probably, on council, vote the extension of this in. There's a question of how that can be reversed that I don't have the answer on, but I'll certainly continue to find out. I'm not in favor of the continuance for 10 years, the way it's operating right now, being expended without transparency. And one quick thing, the 20% doesn't benefit all the citizens of the city. Anybody here a registered voter in the city who does not own their house? Anybody in the city? Willing? Okay, so you don't get a benefit out of that tax, do you? No. Okay.
What challenges does an individual face in opening up a small business here in Myrtle Beach?
Too many. The business license, taxes, and fees. I mean, you go to, first of all, you got to make sure the place that you're opening up has got it's zoned for doing that. Then you'll get into getting a building permit if you do any renovations. And while you're doing that, you're getting your permanent signage design. You put a sign in the window that says coming soon. After they said you can have the business there, and then somebody from the city comes by and says, hey, you didn't get that sign approved that says coming soon. So then you, in your business license, have to project what your revenues are for the year and pay the tax on that. You haven't even started your business, and you're paying up front your whole year's business revenue taxes. So we're not welcoming to small businesses at all. We have an approval process for a lot of the building permits and signage permits that is very subjective, and it's something that I would get rid of and consolidate in some of the departments of the city. Now, I'm not saying we don't need regulations for signage and building permits. We certainly do. But if you've ever been to a community appearance board meeting, I'd say about 90% of the decision-making process there could be handled on a professional administrative level if we had clear written regulations in this city that somebody comes here and opens a business, knows what their limitations are up front, and they're not spending money on design fees to see some guy say, I don't like the color of your shoelaces. I think the problem with our regulations are they're really not there. They're all subjective decisions of a few people in this city. We need objective regulations written out so people know where they need to go. They need maybe an ombudsman in the city to get these things going, like Mike said. But people, when they open a business, want to know what they really are up against. And once they get through this maze of the city and all the agencies, and they keep getting shut down for whatever reason, or getting their pocket picked for another dime, they get a little frustrated and get discouraged to do things. We need to make it an easier process, and the incentive is to make it an open and transparent process that everybody can understand the regulations and they can move forward. That's what our society needs to do, or we're just not going to survive. We just keep choking off business people.
Myrtle Beach has experienced large crime rates during the bike weeks typically. What has city and county government done right and wrong in handling these weeks in the past and present years? And what would you do differently?
Two things. The city manager should quit running the police department, and the city council should quit running the police department, have a good professional police department, make recommendations on their experience, and the council fund those requirements. I don't think the city's done anything correct on the bike weeks. I think they've failed on both bike week issues. They've selectively chose who they want as tourists in this town, and they've failed to communicate with the leaders of these bike weeks. And they only communicate to them and not with them. So it's a one-way communication, and that in combination with the lack of policing that's allowed for the police to, the police to do their job, it's been a disaster. The bikers are tourists too, whether you like them or not. These people with the Mustangs are tourists, whether you like them or not. But if you don't set the rules up front, we get what we get. And it's time to change that and welcome all tourists. And maybe we need to look at it and take a different approach to this whole thing. Years ago, I found myself going back and forth to New Orleans on business, and I got involved with going back on Mardi Gras, which is a great festival down there. And there's three things I noticed how New Orleans welcomed all their tourists. They zeroed in on crowd control. They had some rules like you can't have any glass containers in your hand on the street. You might have a plastic cup with a beer in it, but you can't have a glass bottle. You can't assault or get in a fight, or they'll lock you up without question. And when the crowds start bunching up, there's a bunch of law enforcement people that push the crowd down the street, and one of them pulls the person off the balcony that made them bunch up. So we just don't have that here. We need to welcome all tourists, and all their money's green, and that's what this town survives on. So we have failed on all accounts in the bike week.
Currently, property taxes are voted on by local government and not the local population. Would you allow local citizens to vote on tax changes? Why or why not?
This is a pretty loaded question, but let's be realistic here. If we gave all the voters all the power to vote on taxes, what would happen? We'd have no government revenues, okay? What we need to do is start with fiscally responsible elected officials to be fiscally responsible in how they're spending their money. There are certainly some taxes that should be voted on by the voters, and things like the TDF for one. I agree with Ann there. But the basics of government, we need to get back to it. And whatever that cost is for public safety, whatever that cost is for our basic government services, to have clear regulations and infrastructure, and we have our utility portions of the government. That's kind of the starting baseline. And we all as a community, whether we're permanent residents or tourists or guests, have to figure out that formula and how to spread that expense. But we have to be wise about it and fiscally responsible. And as we spread the wealth, we have to spread the expense equally. First of all, I thank Kate for inviting us here, and Mike for emceeing this. We've got a lot of issues in this city, but to fix all of them, we got to start with the priorities, and that's what I'll start with: the law enforcement and the process of getting the city moving forward with the development. I wish I could talk about parking, but let me just say this: I want to keep it simple. Parking is the easiest problem we have in this city, and it's become the biggest vocal thing. And I've got an answer for it. Talk to me later, I'll tell you about it.